Good morning. I'm Pete Najarian. This is the take for Market Rebellion. I got to tell you something. What an incredible week once again. And when we look back to all the different news stories and some of the movement that we've had, it's just been another incredible week and a lot of news stories, not all of it just based upon the catalyst of earnings, but we have seen all kinds of different things coming out there, including several splits and all the rest of it. We'll get into that in just a second. So looking back at yesterday, the NASDAQ bell to bell was strong, and the divergence is once again in place because the NASDAQ was strong. NASDAQ was up about 80 points. Really impressive day. You look over at the Dow, is getting dragged down fairly early once we opened Disney, and Disney was getting pounded to the downside after their earnings. That really did pull on the Dow. As a matter of fact, it basically held in a fairly tight range, but well off 100 points throughout most of the session, and actually finishing today down 160 points. We had volatility that was in a relatively constricted range, probably because despite the fact that the market was getting hit to the downside, much of that was just one stock, Disney, and it was basically hovering around those price levels once we got there. So you look at the volatility index, we didn't get anywhere close to 18 yesterday. Well, actually, we did get close to 18, but we closed underneath 18 yesterday as we started to settle down a little bit from that early shock of Disney and that big push to the downside. Crude finished today a little over 81, a little bit of a range there though, 80 to 82. It's a little bit wider range than we have been seeing for crude, but still holding well above that 80 and closing above 81. You look at the 10-year, if I told you it was 157, you'd probably say, of course it was. It's been right there within a little bit, but 155 and just a little bit either side of that, up or down. That's where we found ourselves. You look over at Bitcoin, pretty nice day and actually hovering around that 65,000. That was yesterday. Today's a little bit of a different day, but we had a lot of different things going on sector-wise. We had materials really working nicely to the upside, nearly a 1% move to the upside. Technology having a great day yesterday. Financials, not so bad either. Energy, not so bad. Semiconductors, a really, really powerful move yesterday, up nearly 2% yesterday. So what were some of those big movers that we were seeing yesterday? Well, Freeport-McMoRan had an absolutely amazing move to the upside. It was up over 9% to the upside yesterday. And I'm going to get into some of the unusual options that we haven't really been doing here on the take, but I thought it made some sense because of what we were seeing yesterday. I look over at Seagate, STX, and I look over at Western Digital, WDC. Those names, extremely powerful as well, up 5, 6, 7% yesterday. I look over at Xilinx and AMD, pretty decent day, up 4 and 5.5% across on those. Chinese names had a pretty strong day yesterday. You look at JD, PDD, you look at NetEase and Baidu, all of those names, 3.5%, as much as an 8% move to the upside for many of those various Chinese names. Oh, and we did have Disney, and yes, Disney got pounded like a lot of us were somewhat expecting because of the fact that streaming, pricing power, a lot of that was overpriced for the stock. And the stock was way up towards 185, got up over 200. It did pull back, was holding right around near that 180. It's gotten hit a few times into the upper 160s. Well, yesterday it got pounded down to 158 for the lows and actually kind of hovered around that 160, 162 area for the majority of the day. But that was definitely a monstrous pull to the downside. Walgreens Boots has been trading pretty nice of late. That was up about 2%. So I mentioned what was going on with some of the unusual option activity yesterday. What if I told you that Freeport-McMoRan, FCX, a name that you know that I've loved for a long period of time. I've been talking about copper, the EV space, how big copper, the demand is going to be. Yesterday, Freeport-McMoRan didn't hit one time, did not hit two times, 3 separate huge option buying situations yesterday, unusual option activity yesterday for Freeport-McMoRan. So there's a statement being made there. We also had the Chinese ETFs showing a little bit of action as well, looking at the FXI, starting to see a little bit more of a theme of some of that upside call buying in that space as well. So that stood out. Uber. Now, we've talked about this name. It got smacked around pretty decent, but Uber has been seeing a lot of upside option activity as well of late. So that one stood out. I'll tell you what, how about the massive trade that we've seen out of the gold mining ETF, that GDX yesterday? That was another one. We had a lot more in the EV space as well. Just giving you a little bit of backdrop of what the theme was kind of, or themes that were playing out yesterday as far as the unusual options activity. So we've gotten through Veterans Day and obviously making sure that we treated everybody exactly right because of the Veterans Day and how things were going. And boy, I had a great opportunity last night to go and hear one of the folks from the Army who lost two of his limbs at the lower parts of his legs. And man, what an inspirational talk. If you can reach out to veterans at any time, it doesn't have to be on Veterans Day, certainly shake a hand. And we should all be appreciative of the sacrifice that these men and women have made for so many different years. All right, now, pre-market, we're looking at the Dow up about 100 points. Look at the NASDAQ up about 30 points. It's pretty much where we kind of hovering around and finding ourselves. First hour of trade, not a whole lot of movement. Last I looked, the Dow was up still about 70 points. We were up about 45 points on the NASDAQ. Some of the news that's out there, we had already heard earlier in the week, GE splitting that stock up into three. J&J is the big news today. That's a stock that got a pretty nice pop, started to come back fairly fast after the pop, but stock was up a couple of percent early on the announcement of this split, and certainly having a little bit of an influence on different parts of the market. We've heard a lot about splits of late. We've had Merck, we've had a lot of conversations about Pfizer, all of these different stocks where we are seeing splits, and as I said, the GE as well. So inflation fears, they should be out there. They are out there. We heard about that CPI number, and so the highest number in 30 years. There's a lot going on underneath. And so that's something that I think we all have to keep a very close eye on. I'm looking at the volatility index. Last I looked, that's hovering right at 17. Matter of fact, we talked about it closing a little bit in the 17.5 range. Right around 17 is where we are. We'll see how that goes throughout the trading day as you start to price in. Saturday, no trade. Sunday, no trade. You get to Monday, and then you've got to adjust that volatility index, just as part of what's going on, especially when you're looking at the implied volatilities of a lot of these various stocks. So J&J, as I mentioned, up a couple of percent. Seagate, once again, that was a name that was up 4.5% early, popped up over 10%. It's pulled off a little bit of that, but still holding on pretty nicely. I look over at Hewlett-Packard, not looking so great. That name was under some pressure early on. It was down 4.5%. Then it was down 7%. There was a sell from Goldman Sachs there. Western Dig up about 4.5%. So kind of contributing along with Micron gives you a little idea what's going on in the semiconductor space right now. Some of these names definitely going to be a buoy to start pulling up the rest of that if this continues. Peloton, just another day, stock down another 2.5%. It's just the way it's been going, unfortunately, for Peloton. So we look over at tech, up somewhere between 0.25% and 0.5%, moving around a little bit. Biotech having a really nice day, up about 0.5% early on. Energy under a little bit of pressure. We talk about oil. Now it's trading closer to 80. So a lot going on in terms of, we've talked about that range, and that range getting a little bit wider on a day in, day out basis. We've seen a little bit more of that as we've pressed through this week. We'll see if we can hold on to 80, or do we start getting back towards 79, or maybe even something lower. So two unusuals, and we're out of here. No halftime, no 5 o'clock. We do have the cocktail hour later on for the Market Rebellion folks. So Activision trading around 68.73. So just underneath 69, we got a buyer of 11,800 of the November 26th expiring. So you've got a couple of weeks to this play out. The 72 strike calls going for 40 cents up to about 64 cents. As I said, 11,800 of these Activision calls trading there. USO, I really usually move away from a lot of the ETF type things and all the rest of that. I'd rather be in the individual names. I'd rather be somewhere where I think I can get much more beta for movement. But this is a sign of what we've been seeing a little bit in terms of energy. We've talked about crude in 1 year going from 38 up to all the way up to 85. So an unbelievable run. Here we are trading at 80, as I mentioned. So early, 55.80 is where USO was trading, US Oil Fund. 13,000 of the December 3rd expiring 59.5 calls getting bought for about 45 cents on that 13,000. So pretty significant buying there, pretty significant buying in Activision. We are seeing size after size after size. I didn't mention this, I apologize, but yesterday about 39.5 million contracts. So almost feels like a sleeper after the start of October, where we're averaging somewhere closer to about 46 million per day. 39 million per day is what we've been averaging the entire year. That's exactly where we hit yesterday. So a pretty busy day once again. We joke about that a little bit, but the volumes are absolutely extraordinary. And some of these size of individual trades, whether they're ETFs or individual names, just some massive trades that we are seeing in the option spots. Really excited to see a lot of that in terms of the derivatives world. We really are excited about that. Folks, Have a great and safe weekend. Look forward to seeing you on Monday. This is The Take. I will see you later on.